Hi there, my name is Maria Lewis. I'm an assistant film curator at ACMI, the Australian Centre for Moving Image, and I'm so delighted to be joined by Sam Pollard, the award-winning filmmaker behind the fascinating MLK FBI. Sam Pollard, thank you for joining us. You came prepared, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Maria. How have you been?
I've been good. All things considered, global pandemic, weird year for everyone involved. How about yourself? How are things in the US at the moment?
We're hanging in. The trials and tribulations of our government, we're hanging in.
You have such a long and storied career as one of the leading voices in terms of documenting the Black experience in America. And because of that, the range of subjects that you've covered has been so expansive. What was it about this story that made you want to dedicate the next few years of your life to it?
It was a good book. Myself and my producer, Benedine, had read this book about MLK being surveilled by Hoover and the FBI, and we thought it was a really good read and a good way to look at Dr. King in a different way and in the FBI in a different way. So we optioned the book from the writer of it, a gentleman named David Garrow. And we then went to his house and home in Pittsburgh and spent 4 hours with him with a camera crew in tow, interviewing him about the genesis of the book and the information in the book and what he was trying to find out about King and the FBI surveilling him. It was a really good interview, which became sort of the frame for the film.
Yeah, I read his biography on Dr. King as well, and it was pretty extraordinary, especially when it's such a well-documented figure. You always think to yourself, well, what more is left to be said or what more is left to be uncovered? And he's incredible as a writer at being able to do that, I think, for sure.
Yeah, he definitely did. Definitely did a great job.
Newly declassified documents make up the backbone of the story. And although J. Edgar Hoover's obsession with Dr. King was known, the documents provide further insight into just how insidious that obsession was. I'm curious, was there anything in those documents that was surprising to you?
Well, the one document that really was surprising was the letter that they created. William Sullivan wrote, basically, supposedly a Black person telling Dr. King, we know who you are. We know the kind of things you've done. You've betrayed your community, and you know what you need to do, which is basically intimating that he should kill himself. So I thought that was pretty illuminating and sad that the FBI would go that far to destroy and discredit Dr. King and his reputation.
Yeah, I have to agree there. And I mean, some of the events that are featured in the film are some of the most documented events in American history, like the March on Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
And the archival footage I was really fascinated by, because although it was these really well documented events, it was angles and perspectives that I'd never seen before. What was the process like in terms of trying to source that kind of archival material?
Well, it takes hiring a really good archival producer who knows how to go into those archives and unearth things that you had never seen, or quality of the material that was so good that you're surprised at. I had never seen material with that kind of quality of the March on Washington. So we hired a really good archival producer, a gentleman named Brian Becker, who really did a great job in searching out and finding not only the stuff that I was familiar with, that you might be familiar with, but finding new images of it that was even better quality, and then unearthing some things I had never seen before, like Dr. King's first televised interview with that reporter in Montgomery, Alabama, of Dr. King with his wife, Coretta, and their children, with his parents sitting around when the kids were in the playroom. I had never seen that footage before, so that was pretty surprising stuff.
Yeah, in particular on the bus, as they're on the way to the march, some of that material and the lead up to the actual event itself.
Great stuff.
Amazing, and such a good job at grounding the moment and making it feel really lived in, rather than it being the same perspective that you've seen. One of my favorite elements, I should say, of MLK FBI is your ability to thread the needle in terms of linking white America's fear of Black sexuality with the FBI's practical pursuit of Dr. King. As a filmmaker, how is it that you are able to manage juggling the micro and the macro simultaneously with something like that?
It's called good editing, Maria. It's called good and careful editing, where you're trying to make sure those juxtapositions work. And we had a wonderful editor, a young woman named Laura Tomaselli, who was able to pick up the mantle, and really shape some sequences that even better than I could have imagined, And I'm an editor of long standing, but she did some things that surprised me and excited me. And, that's how you make it work. You got to figure out the juxtaposition of the material. I mean, one of the things we always learn about filmmaking is that, we go out and shoot all this material, we do these interviews, we find the archival footage, but the real test is when you go in the editing room and start to put that material together. Will you make it rise like a cake, or will it fall flat like some cakes do when you don't have the proper ingredients or you don't put it at the right temperature? So that's part of that process.
You've worked with a lot of incredibly talented people. Spike Lee is obviously a legend and one of the first people that come to mind. But, you mentioned your editor and you mentioned your archival producer, Brian DeBecker, whose work on OJ Made in America was pretty extraordinary as well.
Oh, you've done your homework there, man.
Yeah, it's my job. But in terms of mixing people that you've worked with for a really long time, but also rediscovering and locating new talent, how important is that for you in terms of delegating and building out a crew that are just as young and hungry as well as experienced?
Well, I was very fortunate that coming up in the business when I did, I was mentored by some very talented filmmakers and editors. And so I came away philosophically believing that that's also part of my responsibility, to mentor and help shape the careers of the next generation. Now, there are some people who I've worked with time and time again. I mean, this film, I would say the only person that I collaborated with before was Ben Hadeen, because we had produced 2 Trains Running. But we had hired Laura to do our sizzle reel. And we were so impressed with her work on the sizzle reel. Ben said, well, you should make her as a full-time editor. And I said, sure. And then, the composer we used, a gentleman named Gerald Clayton, I had never used him before, but he turned out to be marvelous. He turned out to do some phenomenal work. So sometimes you take chances on some people, but you're looking to give them opportunity to stretch their wings. And that's what we hopefully did with those 2.
Yeah, I think it really pays off in the finished product. With the conventions of the documentary, a lot of people would be expecting, I should say, maybe not used to, but expecting this idea of having talking heads throughout the piece where you see the face of the person and you get a little title card explaining who they are and why they're relevant to the project. And I was very interested in the fact that you don't reveal any of that until the final sort of 10 to 5 minutes of the film. And I was really curious about why that was, because I think it's something that really pays off when you're watching the film, and is something that's really surprising. And I was curious about why that was a conscious choice.
Well, in 2011, I had seen a documentary called The Black Power Mixtape, done by this Swedish filmmaker, Goran, his first name. And what was so engaging about that film was he had all this phenomenal footage of the Black Power movement from 67 to 75. And he just let the footage play, and he would have these voiceovers of Angela Davis or Kathleen Cleaver or Harry Belafonte coming in and out of the film. You just heard their voices. And when we started thinking about how to stylistically create this film, one of the first things I said to Ben was, nobody's on camera. We should do all audio. And we only shot them on camera because when we started to go to people to get money and we were telling them we were going to just do it voiceover only, there was a little skittishness and nervousness about doing it that way. So we thought we should play it safe and put everybody on camera when we did the interviews, just make sure we had good audio quality. But the idea of showing them in the epilogue really wasn't my idea, it was Laura. She felt it would be a great reveal to see the people who had been commenting throughout the film while you're watching this footage unfold now be on camera, which was a smart idea to me. I thought it was very smart on her part.
Yeah, it's very...
I can't take credit for that.
You really got your money's worth with Laura, from the sizzle reel to that final epilogue. She's great.
Yeah.
I was listening to your interview with Larry Wilmer on his podcast, and he's amazing. I was very interested in your discussion about humanizing these iconic figures like Dr. King Why do you feel that's important with a film like yours?
I think it's just not my film. I think anytime we're given the responsibility of looking at a person who's considered an icon in a film, I think part of the responsibility is to show you, sure, this person did some important things, but they were human beings too, and that means that they had flaws. So if I was doing a film about Nelson Mandela or Winnie Mandela, I would want to look at them from all different angles. I wouldn't just want to say to them, he is the national hero of South Africa, led South Africa to democracy. I'd want to dig into who he was, you know, but not in the way that I call you a gotcha moment. Try to do it in a way that you seem responsible as a filmmaker. And so King, to me, yeah, I mean, you know, there's been many films on Dr. King before we made this one. There'll be many more films on Dr. King after this one is sort of had its run. But everybody brings their own particular take and vision. My take usually is nobody walks on water, everybody's human, and that's what I'm trying to paint.
Yeah, it comes across really multifaceted, I think.
That's the idea. Good term, multifaceted.
My final question for you is, what was the last great piece of nonfiction that you consumed, whether it was a documentary or a feature or a podcast?
The last great piece of documentary, let me think. You know, these are, yeah. There's this film called Collective that's really very good that I just saw.
My favorite film that I've seen, I think, in the past years.
Really good film. Yeah, it's a really good film. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sam Pollard. I really appreciate it. MLK is a fantastic film, and we're really honored to be able to show it.